So welcome everybody to the Digital Craft Festival. My name's Emma Daker and I'm the Exhibitions and Project Development Manager at Craftspace in Birmingham. And we're a charity that creates opportunities to see, make and be curious about exceptional contemporary craft. And I'm really pleased this afternoon to be joined by 4 great makers who are all exhibiting in the Digital Craft Festival this weekend and online. And the theme for our conversation this afternoon, our chat, is care, repair and shared resources in contemporary craft. And the theme for this conversation has come from Craftspace's research that we've been doing over the last couple of years for our touring exhibition called We Are Commoners, which is going to launch in spring next year. And the exhibition is exploring the possibilities of the small acts of commoning that are possible through making, both by artists individually, but also artists that are working collectively with communities doing co-authored pieces of work. So the purpose for the We Are Commoners exhibition, we've been following the definition of commons by Peter Barnes, who's the On the Commons founder, an organisation in America that deals with this huge subject that is the commons. And the definition we've been using for our work is the commons means things we share, places we share, systems we share, ideas we share, and culture we share. So we're really thinking about how things are changing from what's perhaps been the culture of me to thinking about we and communities and how people can work together. And this has a lot of synergy we've felt with craft. So we're going to be discussing what this means in terms of making practices and the craft community this afternoon. And we're going to focus on shared resources, but also how this might manifest into acts of care and repair in individual practice, but also for the craft community as well and craft audiences. So, as I said, I'm here with 4 fantastic makers, and I'm really pleased to welcome Charlotte, Katy, Sue and Bronwen. So if we could go around and maybe you all introduce yourselves and say a little bit about your work, that would be great. So Charlotte.
I'm Charlotte Meek. I run the Stitch Society and we make artisan workwear for artists and makers from fabrics. They're mainly sourced in the UK and all our products are made in Yorkshire as well.
That's great. Katy.
Hello everybody, I'm Katy Warriner and I am the sole maker and owner of Warriner Leatherworks, which is a small leatherworking business based on the fringes of Dartmoor in Devon, using locally sourced materials from the last remaining oak bark tannery and very much focusing on soil regeneration, working with farmers to look after their land and then with the byproducts of their cow or meat industry to be able to make pieces from that.
Great, thank you. Sue.
I'm Sue Trindle and I'm known as Quercus Silver online mostly, and I make silver and resin jewellery in bold colours and bold shapes, and I'm kind of inspired by sculpture, mid-century and earlier sculpture really. I make most of my work starts out as sculptures and develops into these colourful things. That's me.
Thank you. Bronwen.
Hi, I'm Bronwen and I make jewellery, large statement pieces, mostly one-offs, and they're made from waste plastic, recycled silver, and a composite material that I make with the waste that I create.
Great, thank you. So to start us off, Bronwen, I'd like to, we've started to think about shared resources, and I'd like to come to you first. When I first contacted you about the conversation and what I was thinking of being the subject, you were really pleased, I think, and you really liked the idea of commons, as I put it, explained it with the definition. Can you kind of tell us why that was and what you've been doing that particular afternoon as well?
Yeah, it was one of those funny occasions, you know, where something just clicks together, these kind of synergy of ideas. So I'd just been on the beach. I live in Pembrokeshire on the coast, and I collect the plastic that I use mostly from the beach. And the beach has become this really interesting place during lockdown. During the first lockdown, the beach was blocked off. You weren't allowed to go on it, which felt really strange because it's such a shared space. And so that was very, very strange and difficult for me, because that's actually where I get my materials from. And there were storms and lots of plastic, and you weren't allowed to go on the beach. Anyway, since then, obviously they've been open, and people have had a very different kind of relationship with this shared space, it seems. So this particular day, the day that I spoke to you, I'd just come back and I'd been talking to other people on the beach who were collecting plastic. And it seems to have become this thing that people do now, is they care for the beach much more than they did before. And there were quite a few people collecting plastic. And there's a funny thing, on beaches often you don't speak to each other, you know, you're kind of respecting each other's space. But on this particular day, I approached at a distance people who were collecting plastic and said, "Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing with your plastic?" And they said, "Oh no, we're just cleaning the beach. We're just getting rid of it." And I said, "Oh, could you leave it so I can go through it, because I use the plastic to make jewelry." And then a series of really interesting conversations came up about the beach as a resource for healing, really, and for well-being. So many people were going there because they felt really, really troubled by the experience of lockdown, and it was a real release for them to go there. But also that they felt going there and collecting plastic gave them a sense of purpose at a time when they were feeling quite lost. But then there was this really lovely thing that they could then pass on the plastic that they collected to me, and I could tell them, I'm going to be making jewelry out of it. So I think there's huge potential in this idea, really, of spaces like beaches being much more of a gathering place for people and ideas, and resources, looking at resources too. So yeah, that was why I'd been having those thoughts, and then I spoke to you and I was thinking, oh yes, the Commons as a place, a meeting place, would be interesting.
That's really interesting. I had no idea the beaches were closed off like that during the first lockdown, that you couldn't walk on them. I hadn't realised that. But one of the artists we've been working with has been working in parks, and he's found similarly that since lockdown, people are using parks in different ways, and there's a lot of creatives there kind of gathering because they can't gather in other spaces. So it is interesting how the pandemic, I think, has shifted people's thinking, but also I suppose things like climate change is in people's minds as well, because it's such a big issue. So do you have all these people kind of collecting for you now?
I think they're getting more used to me. At first they thought it was a bit odd that I was after their, you know, because what they see is rubbish, something evil that needs to be just out of, you know, got off the beach and in the bins as soon as possible. And I see it differently, you know, I see it as a resource. So they're beginning, you know, when they see my work online, they kind of understand a bit more. But it makes me think, when I'm on the beach, I should take bits of jewelry with me and have more resources so that I can explain a bit more clearly what I do, and that it's quite serious. You know, I'm not just, my work isn't about junk. You know, I'm using it as a raw material in a serious way, in the way that you would use any other material.
Yeah, a very refined finish.
Well, I try and represent it in a different way, so it's not seen as just, you know, a bit of old rubbish. That's the idea. But yeah, so yeah, I think there's huge potential for me to use my trips to the beach collecting material as a place of engagement as well.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Then becomes a resource for you with other people, what they're doing with the rubbish, but also a resource for other people and their ideas of what's possible with the plastic they're finding. So it becomes a shared space in a kind of different way as well, which is great.
And people understand more about the plastic than I do, so I couldn't understand why there were so many rifle barrel plastic. What are they called? The things that you shoot.
Casings.
Yeah, that's it. Casings. Well, and they're plastic casings from rifles. And I don't understand why there's so many of these on the beach. And they said, oh, it's from cruise ships. They do activities on cruise ships where they're shooting.
Oh, wow.
I mean, and I would never have known that if I hadn't had a conversation. So we're talking about all the stories that are connected to this rubbish too. Anyway, I'll stop talking because I could go about plastic rubbish.
That's awful though. I mean, obviously we know cruise ships are quite polluting anyway, but you don't think about all the aspects of it. Okay, so Charlotte, when we spoke, you got quite a different take on shared resources, which was interesting to me as well. You spoke about the community aspect of craft and how that's evident at fairs. Can you tell us a bit about your take on shared resources in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing that I really missed this year is seeing other makers at fairs, because normally we do kind of 3 or 4 a year. And it's just nice to catch up with people, because there is a real community, because as a maker, quite often you're making on your own a lot of the time. So to actually go to fairs and to mix with other people who are who think in the same way that you do, because quite often as a maker, I find that people think quite differently, whereas if you're creative, your mind is constantly coming up with ideas, and it's very difficult to sometimes share that. But we also use the fairs to find people to collaborate with. So we did this, the one behind me is with Modern Floss, who's based in Sheffield. She does embroidery. So we printed a leopard print apron, and then she embroidered on it to make it stand out. So that's become one of her pieces now. We also work with other printers and textile printers and embroiderers as well, just to because quite often our aprons kind of enhance what somebody else is doing. So with the printed fabric, if someone's making tea towels and oven gloves, quite often if they have one of our aprons, it kind of raises their range, really, just having an apron that's actually designed for makers. And it's quite often their products are quite bespoke. So to add, and we promote their ranges on our websites as well. So we see it as a relationship with the other makers. So, but it is a good resource for us to find people that we can work with.
So is that partly because you're kind of actively going around to see who you might work with, or it comes kind of organically just through conversations?
Really, yeah, it's normally it's not sort of, I don't approach people and say, would you like to work with this? Quite often it's a long-term relationship. So you see people at fairs for a couple of times and see what they're doing and talk to them, and it normally does take a year or two to kind of get things underway, because people have to trust you. I mean, when you first introduce yourself, people don't know me from Adam, so they could think I'm just going to take their designs and run off. So but we are getting a reputation for being quite good to work with, that we don't just kind of go, right, we'll take your designs and that's it. It is a 50-50 sort of sharing of resources, and it's an ongoing relationship. It isn't just a one-off. If people want to work with us on ongoing and kind of introduce new designs, and we've done with during the pandemic, we've done face masks from our waste, but we've also done it with other people's waste as well. So that's been quite a good project to be involved with as well.
It's fantastic. That notion of trust, I think, is an important one with people working together. It kind of comes back to you on the beach a bit, Bronwen, with people trusting what you're saying to them, which is one reason, I suppose, why wearing a piece of your jewellery is quite good, and that exchange involves trust as well, especially at times like these as well, with coaching people and things like that. It's a key thing, I think, trust. And Sue, you're very involved in craft fairs and exhibiting as well. What's your experience of networking at craft fairs, and how is it important to you?
It's hugely important. I mean, when you're preparing for a show, you're doing all the making, and then you're doing all the marketing, and then you're designing your stand, and then everyone's getting very tense about getting there, and everybody puts up their stand, and you've done all this alone. But then when it's all relaxed and everybody's got their beautiful stands out, you get to go and have a look, you get to see people's expressions. There's so much positivity, you get to feel their work, We get to talk about the work, we get to talk shop, which we don't often do if we're working alone. Even in mixed studios, you don't get to talk about it that often. So it's a really positive thing, shows. I only do 3 or 4, like Charlotte, a year, and they're a big deal. But it's yeah, it's always good to see what other people are doing and to talk about their work and to encourage, because we all get a bit low sometimes being creatives on our own. So it's great to get all that positive feedback from people and encouragement, and people you can work with in the future, or opportunities, or even just lovely old friendships. It's great. I love it.
And you mentioned about shared studio, and you recently moved studio, didn't you? What impact has that had for you in that moving from that shared space?
It certainly changed my practice. I was in a big shared studio. There were 50 artists there, artists and makers mixed, and it was great for instant feedback. We'd pop into each other's studios and say, does this work? Am I doing the wrong thing here? Or do you know someone who can do that? And having moved home, it's all disappeared, which is, yeah, that support network. But we've managed to maintain it by, until recently, meeting on my front doorstep, and people sit in my front yard and we chat over coffee and see what people are doing and what they're making. And now I'm meeting someone tomorrow, in fact, in the park, because she just wants to talk about a different direction she's moved in. So you create these relationships, and hopefully I can take them with me. It's a different experience, but not a bad one. It's always a good thing.
Yeah, it's great you've been able to set something like that up, particularly at the moment as well. I think it's more needed. We're finding, working from home, I think you don't realise that the office is kind of a shared space and shared resource. And those questions come up with our kind of work as well, and you can't just shout over your computer about what you're doing. It is interesting how we create these spaces to exchange ideas and things without even really thinking about it. So Katy, your website, I did a little research of checking all your websites and things. It was fascinating, but it says you're inspired by the old ways of crafters, and how you particularly wanted to move away from mass-produced throwaway society, which I think is similar to Bronwen using the plastics you find. Can you tell us more about that, and how the idea of shared resources resonates with you?
I think just the sentence alone, inspired by the old ways of crafters, rings something quite, really resonates with me anyway. I'm quite a traditional lass at heart. And there's something about, I think, maybe idealistic and romantic, but the idea of the old ways of how something would have, the shared resources around a village. So you would have had a saddler, you would have had a shoemaker or a cobbler, you would have had your farmers, you would have had your pub, and everything else in between. And everything would have probably centered around the village hall or the square or the well in the middle. Everybody would have known everybody else, and each person had a skill. Each person would have traded one skill for another. And probably money didn't really make the world go round in those small spaces back in those days. See, money did make the world go round, but in that small village, people would have traded their skills with one another. And that's something that's really passionate to me. I do a lot of skill sharing, and I'm the first person to ask someone if somebody gets in touch with me, or if I need something from someone else, even if I don't know them from Adam, to say, those that don't ask will never know, but I'm just asking to not be cheeky. Would you be up for a skill share? You have a skill and I have a skill, and is there anything that you'd like in leather that you can trade your skill with me? That the idea, I think, I mean, I work with leather. I use traditional techniques. Most of the tools behind me up here are probably over 100 years old. They all tell a story as well. And each of those tools has gone through so many different makers' hands. And I like the stories that go along with these old crafts. So although I can come up to a contemporary design in my wares sometimes, I still try to stick with a traditional and practical design with my leatherwares. I'm working at the moment with, or I'm currently a member of a community called the Southwest England Fibre Shed. And we are a community of makers, growers and producers of homegrown fibres. So we're looking at flax, hemp, wool is obviously a huge one, and leather as well. It's great that the founder has allowed me to come in as a leather worker, because leather many people believe is still a fibre. It still comes from the ground. It still comes from an animal. So the processes are very similar to the other fibres. We have very shared resources within our systems. You said the word system earlier, and I wrote down systems we share. Within the farming community and within the fibre community, we all share that system. Even if you don't wear a wool jumper, or you don't wear a linen jumper, or you don't have anything in leather, you're still eating food that has come from the ground. And that system is something that we all share between us. And I think that the pandemic has really brought it home where we are in the world at the moment. Not just a pandemic, but I think people are really opening their eyes to climate change. Bronwen, you'll notice it with the amount of plastic that you're picking up from the beaches. There's a lot of waste out there, and I think we're starting to open our eyes to realizing that how much more stuff can we buy from the other side of the world? And just the same as how much can the other side of the world buy stuff from us as well. And I think people are really starting to focus in on where their things come from, what the systems are that are creating them, be that food, be that textiles, be that wrapping or packaging or materialistic items within fashion. And from that, I think we're starting to pay attention to the systems that we live in as well.
I think you're right. I think as well that the pandemic has made people focus on the local more, because we haven't been able to travel and things. And I think people are becoming much more conscious of where they buy things from. I think that was starting to happen anyway before the pandemic. But I do think the pandemic has focused people on their localities a lot more. And I think moving forward, people are going to be more involved in their local area. And I think communities have kind of shot up a bit again locally, with the kind of applauding for the NHS and that kind of thing. People have been meeting each other that they've not met before. So I think that localism is going to be quite a key thing. But that's really interesting.
Meeting people around and about on dog walks. I mean, I live in the middle of nowhere. I think I've got about 7 fields around me before I can get to another house. But meeting people out on dog walks that live in the local town have said that for the first time in 17 years, they've got to know their neighbours' names. And we've really lost that community for such a long time, and it's really starting to come back together again. And yeah, with or without a pandemic, I think it was slowly starting to happen. And that community spirit is really wonderful. It really lifts me up. It makes my heart sing when we can talk about community.
But like you said, there's lots of, like you were saying, Sue, the maker community at fairs it's another community that's important, isn't it? It is important, I think, to have those different communities to draw upon for your different elements of your life.
Yes, yeah, certainly a working community is good, and a creative community is a great thing to be part of. I mean, I used to go to craft fairs before I even became a maker, and I used to see the way people talked about their work and shared what they knew, and I just wanted to join it, and I've been really pleased. It's been a really good part of my life. I've been doing it for 12 years now as a jeweller, and yeah, it's a really positive, good part of my life.
That's great. So Katy, coming back to you again, I liked how you speak about how leather ages over time, and it grows old with you. And I like that idea with all the craftings, actually, that it's a purchase that you consider, and it's going to be part of your life, and it'll become part of memories that you have. But with the leather, I like how you said about it aging, and I thought that seems to kind of bring us, we've talked about shared resources, that kind of brings us to care a bit more, and care for objects, and how also that can lead to care for the owner as well, around self-care and owning these things. But perhaps you can speak a bit about that in your practice, about care. And I was interested about what you were saying about your tools as well, and they look fabulous behind you, I have to say. I love an insight into a workshop. They look great. So I imagine with the age of the tools, you have to repair those as well. So it'd be great to just hear a bit about what you think of that kind of subject.
I think leather is one of those things that does age with you, and it always tells a story as well. I repair things. Sometimes I have things on my workbench that are over 150 years old, and the leather is still going strong. It might just be the stitching that's starting to fray in a few places. And you have this piece in front of you and you think, what have you seen? It's a bit like when you go out and look at the trees and you think, God, you've been standing for a long time. What have you seen in your lifetime? And then you can have these objects, and where have they been? I mean, some of these objects have gone through both world wars and probably have actually gone through the World War as well. And yeah, what stories do they have to tell? What are those marks and scars? But not just the marks and scars of what it's seen in its lifetime, but also the marks and scars that it tells from the animal once the animal was still alive. Leather comes from something that was once living, and that animal bared a life too. It tells its stories, and there are marks and scars on the leather that you can take forward, and I really celebrate those marks and scars. I think the repair side of things, especially with what I do, I make things, I like to say I make things that last a lifetime. I've only been a leather worker for 6 years, so I can only put 6 years worth of practice into that now. So hopefully things are going to last a lifetime, but I make things that can then be repaired. So teaching people, a lot of my work is an investment piece, and some of my pieces are upwards of £500. That's not the average amount of money that people are likely to spend on something. It's a lot of money, so it's an investment piece, but hopefully someone will look at that and go, I can save up my money to be able to buy something like this. And it's the journey that they've gone through to be able to purchase it in the first place, and then the journey forward of care thereafter. They can have this repaired, they can look after it, and each day it's a practical item that can be looked after well. These tools behind me, as I said before, I have no idea how many hands they have passed down in their generations, but somebody's looked after them and somebody's sharpened them every day to keep them going. I'm sure all of us right now are guilty of going online and buying from a large named river something that is rather throwaway but turned up on the doorstep the next day. I know I'm guilty of it for sure. But then there are some pieces that you know you can have in your life that might be heirloom pieces that have been passed down. And some of these tools are also brand new, but I'll be able to look after them to be able to take them forward. And again, that in itself tells a story. Something I like to do on my social media is talk about my tools, and I tell people the stories about them. And some people have come back to me and said, I've never known that a tool could last that long. So there's an education that comes along with it as well, which I think brings us back to the idea of community and sharing your resources and being able to educate to take us into the next step.
I think that's true about the educating and sharing with each other, because a lot of people just wouldn't know how to go about repairing a tool. So they'd just get a new one to replace it. I'm guilty of that as well. So it is about that. I think, Sue, when we met before, you talked about communication and how important that is. And I think that's true. It's sharing those skills and ideas and being vocal about it so people know where to find you as well. So Bronwen, with your work, obviously, you've touched on it a bit, I think, about the environment and how that thinking about waste and things impacts your work. But can you perhaps talk to us a bit about that from a care kind of aspect, how you think that impacts in your work?
Yeah, definitely. I have to be honest, I'm not the most environmentally friendly person at all. And I think I just come to it from a materials point of view, and that all materials are interesting, as well as being precious resources. They're also just interesting. And my dad was just a huge collector of stuff. I mean, he worked with wood. He was a boat builder and a really good carpenter. So he just collected materials thinking that might be useful. I'm going to keep that. And so I've just inherited that. And I think that's always been there. I wouldn't have labelled it thinking about the environment or being aware of the idea that we should be reusing and repurposing materials. It was just a natural way of being in our family. But I was also interested in the idea that we don't really know plastic as a material. And so when we started looking at it being washed up on beaches, it didn't look shiny and bright in the way that we thought plastic was. You know, people talk about truth to materials, and people working with plastic were, you know, very much about its kind of plasticity, you know, its bright shininess, and that was being true to the material. But actually, that's only about you know, one fraction of its lifetime it's going to look like that, because it scratches and you get marks and scars in the same way that Katy was talking about. And I found those interesting and a new way of looking at plastic. So what happens when you scratch plastic or mark plastic? Does it become less plasticky? It's just another way of interpreting the material. And the truth is, we're going to be digging up plastic for generations. It's going to be still washing up on the beaches, even if we stop chucking it away in the same quantities. It's still going to be around. So our understanding of the material, I think, has to really change. So yeah, my way of working with it is to kind of celebrate its imperfections and its cracks and scratches, and to work it in a different kind of way. I don't heat it up. That's partly, and I don't use power tools very much either. That's partly because I used to work on a boat and I didn't have enough electricity, but it's also about resources. But it makes you work in a different way. I think it's interesting if you get given a different set of parameters, rules to work by, then you produce different work. And that's so yeah, so I use hand tools, which is a strange thing to do with plastic. And I don't heat it up, which is also a strange thing to do with plastic, because it's the obvious thing that people do. They say, oh, so how do you melt it down? I say, no, I don't melt it down. I use it as minimally as possible. I'll cut it and I'll set it and I'll save the dust that I create from cutting, and I'll mix the dust with a binder, and that will create another material that I can set the plastic into. So I throw very, very little away. Which is good. It is good, but it's also interesting for me. I find that an interesting challenge.
Really interesting. Sorry.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's an ongoing thing. I have to. Plastic is also unlike leather. We don't know where it comes from, you know, and we don't know what type of plastic it is, and there's so many different sorts. So when it washes up on the beach, I've had to become a bit of a plastic detective to work out how can I use this and is it safe to use it. It's not like there isn't many books about that. So I don't come from a great kind of tradition, and I'm making it up as I go along. And I'm trying to be as circular as possible in my practice. But I don't know. I don't know. There's no book for me to follow.
Is that a project for you, perhaps, creating that book? I think it's really interesting that that's your starting point for material, because obviously that will resonate a lot with a lot of makers, I think. And with your work, it doesn't look like that. It doesn't have that shiny appearance. It has quite an organic look to the material as well, which is really fascinating how you achieve that.
Yeah, it's about whether and where, you know, the same thing again with the leather, the idea that you can imbue a material with more soul and an interest by the idea that it's aged. So yeah, I live by the sea, and there's often storms here, and so you know, my life is totally ruled by the tide and the wind and the natural environment around me. So those things definitely collide. The other thing that's interesting about where I live is I live opposite an oil refinery. So it's this really beautiful environment, incredibly, you know, it's a site of scientific interest and incredibly diverse marine biology. But then there's this oil refinery overlooking the bay. And it's an amazing reminder, actually. For me, that's where plastic comes from. It comes from oil, you know. And that's the reality of every time we get in the car or heat our houses, it's most likely going to have come from that industry. So I'm interested in where the natural environment and what we think of as unnatural environment meet. I find that a very kind of fruitful, complex and yeah, interesting area to work in.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just absorbing all that and thinking where to go next. So, Sue, we're continuing kind of the care theme. You obviously take great care in your work as well. And how do you hope or feel this carries through to your customers or the wider craft network?
Well, I think, as Bronwen was saying, she takes an alternative material, and I work with alternative materials too. And the finish is really important part of your work. It's what makes good craft, really. You elevate a material to something beautiful, or something beautiful, really. And you communicate it to your customers so that everything you do, from your stand, the way you present your work, how you post your work, how it's presented, is a communication with your customers, really. It's a respect for them, because they're putting hard-earned cash into your work, you know, and a respect for yourself and the work that you make, which is also important, you know. Yeah, it's an important part of it, really. And I think that you create a relationship with your customers through the way you present your work, whatever you're making, whether it's beautiful workwear for makers, or beautiful jewellery, or wonderful bags. I have had a good look. I like shopping for craft. It's one of the things I do really well. But your customers become your ambassadors for you, really. I mean, you know, they love your work. They join your story, and they're a very precious resource, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually, as another thought of kind of resource, just can encapsulate so many things. But I think you're right there about the kind of ambassadors, because you're presenting work that's obviously had a lot of thought put into it, a lot of care into the process, not just into that final piece that they're buying, but the whole process from initial idea to research and everything. And I think people are buying into that. I know when I buy craft that I'm buying into that whole thought process, that whole kind of way of living, if you like, and outlook. And it does, the purchase does become something you care about more than something that's perhaps more throwaway. And it brings us back, I think, again to, since you said it, to the idea of communication stuck with me quite a lot, because it's how you communicate that process. That it goes through to your customers as well, and then how they kind of communicate that care and respect for the work that brings them to be ambassadors as well. But it is kind of a whole way of living and outlook, isn't it, really?
It is a whole way of living. It's certainly all encompassing. Takes a lot of time and effort, but it's a joy. It really is lovely. It's a privilege to make things and share them with people. I've always felt that way about it, and yeah, it's a good thing. It's a wonderful thing, and it makes us all feel better. I certainly found when I moved from my big studio to my little one at home, there was a period when I couldn't work, and I found that very hard. I don't know, everybody else needs to be working. We need to be sharing our creativity. It's a fundamental part of us, really. And I think that's true of all people. Everybody is creative in one way or another. We've just chosen to try and earn a living at it, you know.
Yeah, I think having those time and space to create, but those networks and spaces to share and is what's important too, like the craft fairs that you were saying. Because it is a way of life, but you need to be with people who are sharing that way of life and exchange the ideas, and that brings us back to the craft fairs, doesn't it, and the importance of those.
Yeah, and the people who come are hugely important, and the feedback you get from them is brilliant, because you could be just, you know, going the wrong way, really, but people will give you feedback and say honestly how they feel about your work, and that is also a lovely positive thing, you know, good or bad. It's always good to get some feedback on your work. Yeah.
Great. So coming to you, Charlotte, as I said, I had a look at everybody's websites, and on yours you have a really interesting blog, your pocketbook blog, I think it's called. And it seemed to me that the different sections and articles that you have on that are a form of self-care, perhaps for yourself. But by sharing them, it becomes like an act of care, which is something we're looking at within the Commons network, and how to share those. Can you tell us a bit more about that feature on your blog and why you write it and what the response has been?
We've been doing I've been doing it for about 18 months now, and it started to create a community, because our aprons are made to last. They're made to, you know, they come with a 10-year guarantee for repairs. So and we wanted to kind of make people part of something. So we do share, you know, if someone shares a picture of our aprons with them wearing it, then we share that. We feature makers that wear our aprons. We feature people that we work with as well, and it's become a way of just kind of sharing things that interest me, but things that might interest other people. So exhibitions, books, recipes, bits about gardening. It's anything that has kind of caught my interest over the week. I kind of collect it in a folder, and then sort of pick and choose what I think people might be interested in for that week. The next few weeks they were lockdown. Last week I did people that sell our aprons through retail, because retail's having such a hard time, and obviously the fairs like the Great Northern and the Craft Festival as well. And then for the next couple of weeks we're going to feature artists that we've either worked with or wear our products, just so that they get a little bit more exposure. Again, it's all about, for me, it's all about support. It's not, we don't sell on our blog. It's not there for us to kind of gain sales. It's just to say, this is really interesting. You might find this interesting, and then just to get it. It is a community, really, and people give us feedback about, you know, what they've enjoyed, what they haven't enjoyed. But generally, people say that they enjoy reading it, so that's why I carry on doing it. And I quite enjoy sitting down and going through things, because it makes me look in a wider sort of remit than I would normally look. So I subscribe to different people's blogs and pick things from them. So it's a kind of an expansive process for me as well.
Is it, in a way, do you find that it gives you a chance to just slow down for a few minutes and look out what else is out there and things you might like to try, such as recipes and stuff?
I'm not sure it makes me slow down. I think it makes me look around. I think it's quite hard to slow down, because I do sometimes think I have gone, because it goes out at 6 o'clock on a Friday, and I have got to 5 o'clock on a Friday and gone, oh, and realised that I haven't done it. So I've had to kind of, but because I put things away over the week, then it's normally there's something there. And I have got into the process now of I set it up the week before, so that I just know I have to kind of slot in 3 things and find photographs. So it's become easier to do, but yeah, it has been a bit of a learning process. But, and there have been a couple that have gone out where it's just the pocketbook and nothing.
I have to say, it doesn't show that. When I was looking at it, it was very calming, and I was like, oh, I want to try that recipe, and I'll have a go at that.
Yeah.
It felt very, giving you a chance to pause, but maybe that's for the viewer.
Yes, I think I try to make it interesting and something that people will want to read, so that they come back, really. So yeah, I don't have many unsubscribers, which is a good sign, I always think.
Do people tend to get back to you and say the things that they've tried?
Yes, particularly recipes. I haven't done that many recipes recently, but I use quite a lot the Guardian recipes, because they have some really good chefs that. So there was an almond cake that, because there's an almond cake that I absolutely love, and I featured it on Instagram as well, but I put it on the blog, and people just loved it, absolutely loved it. So it's really funny things that people pick up on.
It's interesting. It's interesting as well that like the digital space is becoming a shared space, particularly now as well, to exchange ideas. Like that. But I think that the kind of main things we've discussed there really is the particularly longevity of product has come through for me with all of your work, and the act of kind of living with that product as well, and the care, but also so many different shared spaces and networks and communities that everybody has that are so important. Does anyone want to draw out anything from anyone else that's kind of come to mind while we've been chatting? Or
I really wanted to say something to Bronwen, actually, which is you said the word plastic and soul in the same sentence. I've never actually thought of plastic as having a soul before, but it really does. But you also, your plastic really tells a story. So I'm a marine scientist by profession. I've spent my life living by the sea until about 7 years ago when I moved to Dartmoor. So I'm Cornish, but don't tell anyone from Cornwall that I now live in Devon. But you said that your work wasn't really that traditional, but actually you've spent however many years combing beaches, and that's something that's been done for hundreds of years. I think that is a really old tradition to do, and it's really wonderful. And you are an educator of plastic. Plastic's a great material. Use it in the right way and it will last. Well, we all know it lasts a lifetime, but Tupperware is one of the best inventions ever, as long as plastic's used in the right way. And I think what you're doing is incredible. It's such an educational piece as well, to be able to turn something that looks like it's just discarded on a beach, has a story to tell about. Thankfully it's now landed on that beach and you've come along and found it, and it's not now a drift net sucking up turtles and whales and dolphins and seabirds, but then you get to turn it into something that's become useful again. And that really resonates with me. That's a really incredible thing, to be able to turn something that is pretty bad for the world into something that we can take forward as an educational piece too. So thanks for cleaning our beaches.
I need to talk to you about, you know, you're a marine scientist. I'm completely obsessed with the patch of, so at the end of my garden is the bay, and so the work I'm doing at the moment, all of this behind here is all about seaweed. So I'm doing a survey, a seaweed survey with the Marine Conservation Society, just to monitor what's happening with the seaweed, and as an indicator on climate change, what species are present, can help them understand what's happening more broadly, these indicator species. So my next collection is going to be inspired by seaweed. But yeah, I didn't know I was so interested in marine biology. So yeah, I need to talk to you. I know we can do a skill share.
I was going to say, sounds like a skill share brewing right there. That's brilliant.
I came up to Dalefort many years ago when I was doing my degree, and spent about 4 or 5 months at Dalefort on the Pembrokeshire coast, just doing an internship in marine conservation. And interestingly, we spent a lot of time looking at seaweed. I love seaweed. It's a wonderful resource. Sorry, we're digressing and going completely off subject now.
That's lovely.
I live in Angle, which is very close to Dale. Yeah.
Beautiful part of the world. Very beautiful part of the world.
And I want to say to Sue, I miss seeing you, Sue, at festivals.
Oh yeah.
So that bit of community is definitely, I think there's going to be a big deal next year when we all start seeing each other again in the flesh. I think we're going to get overexcited.
Absolutely.
We're just going to be chatting instead of.
Oh no, I'm never on my stand anyway because I'm always chatting to people.
It'll be interesting to see what new relationships might come out after there's so much to catch up on.
Yeah,
that was something that you said about the craft festivals, that the image that popped into my mind is that you get to the craft festivals, you don't know anybody else there, you've gone through the adrenaline of setting everything up, and then before you know it, you've just disappeared off for an hour and you've got your next door neighbour to just look after your stall. You've no idea who this person is, but you go, would you mind looking after it for a minute, and off you just disappear. And you don't think about the money that you need to make, the sales that you need to make, of the customers that are coming up to you, whether the person next to you is going to steal everything off your table or not. Just disappear and trust everybody.
So that brings us back to trust and the community, doesn't it? Yeah, definitely. It's a special place.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you can all get back to it soon, but it's great that Sarah James has done such a great job of creating the online community and network. while we can't meet in person. But it's been great to chat to you all. I don't want to miss anything if anyone wants to comment on anything else. Well, thank you so much for your time today, this afternoon. And for those that are watching us as part of the Digital Craft Festival, do please visit the makers stands online and visit Charlotte, Katy, Sue and Bronwen's pages and find their details to look up their fascinating websites and their shops and everything. And thank you very much for joining us today, and do enjoy the festival while it's on.